Man rescues baby Mustang trapped in a cage. What the mother does next will leave you speechless. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the land. The quiet, serene landscape seemed untouched by time, the vast open fields stretching out as far as the eye could see. It was a place of peace, but there was a stillness in the air that suggested something was amiss. As Zach Monroe pulled up to the makeshift corral, he felt a deep sense of urgency. The moment he stepped out of his truck, the weight of the situation hit him. This was no ordinary rescue. Zach approached the corral cautiously, his heart racing. The dilapidated fence and the cage at the center told the story of a foal's captivity, its struggle for survival. He knew he had to act fast, but everything about this moment felt heavy with uncertainty. The sight of the cage, and the foal inside it, was heartbreaking. It was clear that this wasn't just a rescue mission. This was about saving a life, restoring hope, and giving a mother and her foal a chance to heal. Inside the cage lay a small, trembling foal, thin and covered in dust. Its once shiny coat was now matted, a reflection of the hardship it had endured. The foal's body was frail, its ribs visible through the thin skin, showing the effects of poor nutrition and neglect. Every movement was hesitant, filled with fear, as the foal's wide eyes darted around, unsure of what would happen next. The scars on its small body, both visible and unseen, told a story of trauma and survival. Despite the pain it had endured, there was a flicker of curiosity in its eyes, as if it was holding onto the faintest hope that help had arrived. The air was thick with tension as Zach stepped forward, carefully unlocking the rusted cage. He moved as though walking through a dream, his body tense but his actions smooth, calculated, as though he had done this 100 times before. With a deep, steadying breath, he slid open the door, and the foal, barely more than a skeletal figure, looked up with wide, terrified eyes. Zach paused, kneeling down so he could match the foal's height, reducing his own intimidating presence. The small creature's head jerked back, its muscles tensing as it scanned the man in front of it. Zach didn't rush, didn't force himself any closer. Instead, he held his ground, standing still like a silent observer, letting the foal decide when, or if, it was ready to approach. The foal, once proud and free, now appeared fragile, like a bird with broken wings. Its ribs jutted out beneath its matted coat, each shallow breath making the young creature look like it might collapse at any moment. Dust clung to its coat, a physical sign of the trauma it had suffered. Zach's heart sank as he looked at it, but he didn't allow his emotions to show. He knew that if he were to give in to his instincts and rush in, he could do more harm than good. Instead, he took the time to let the foal get used to him, inching ever so slowly towards the tiny creature. His every movement was careful, slow, almost deliberate. He wasn't going to scare the foal away with sudden gestures or sharp movements. Zach's calming presence seemed to create a fragile bridge between them, a bridge built on trust, patience, and the unspoken understanding that the foal wasn't just a wild animal, but a scared, hurt being needing protection. The foal's eyes darted nervously as it remained backed into a corner of the makeshift corral. Its body trembled, as though each breath was a struggle. With every careful step Zach took toward it, the foal took one tiny, shaky step backward, its hooves scraping against the dirt. Zach could see the fear in its every movement, and yet, there was a tiny flicker of curiosity in those eyes, a tiny, fragile spark of hope. Zach's heart ached as he watched it struggle. He understood its fear, understood the animal's instinct to flee, to survive in whatever way it could. But he wasn't here to hurt it. Slowly, Zach dropped his gaze and bent slightly at the waist, lowering himself even further to the foal's level. He knew that to gain its trust, he had to show it that he wasn't a threat. He wasn't there to control or dominate. He was simply there to offer help, a gentle hand in the chaos of its life. Time seemed to stand still. The minutes stretched on as the foal continued to watch him warily, but Zach noticed something subtle, something beautiful. The foal's trembling began to lessen, if only just slightly. With every slow movement Zach made, the foal seemed to feel it too, recognizing that there was no harm in the steady, quiet figure before it. Zack stayed calm, never showing impatience, not rushing the animal. He was patient, and with each passing second, the foal's body relaxed a little more. It was no longer retreating with every step Zack took, but instead, it seemed to be inching closer, driven by an invisible thread of trust. Every movement Zack made seemed to draw the foal in a little more, as if the little animal was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, not all humans were the same. And slowly, ever so slowly, Zack's quiet, controlled patience started to chip away at the fortress of fear that the foal had built around itself. Finally, the foal took a small step forward, and in that moment Zack could feel the shift, the delicate moment when an animal chooses to trust. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Zack's breath caught in his chest as the foal stood a mere foot away, still trembling but now less tense. Taking a deep breath, Zack's voice broke the silence. "It's okay, little one," he whispered, his voice soft and steady. "You're safe now. You don't have to be scared anymore." The words were simple, yet they carried all the weight of his empathy and understanding. His voice was soothing, gentle, as if each word was a reassurance, a quiet promise that the foal would never have to endure the horrors of its past again. The foal's eyes locked on Zack as he spoke, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade around them. The foal's fearful body remained still, but there was a softness in its eyes, a softness that hadn't been there when Zack first arrived. The foal had heard his words, felt the calmness in his voice, and somehow it began to believe. Slowly its body relaxed. The once frantic pace of its breathing evened out, and its tremors became less frequent. Zack's words, filled with kindness and understanding, worked like a balm for the foal's troubled soul. He didn't move closer, didn't try to touch it. Instead, he stayed right where he was, offering nothing but his voice, the one thing he knew the foal needed most in that moment. Zack's calm presence, coupled with the softness of his words, spoke louder than any command or gesture ever could. It wasn't about the foal obeying him. It was about trust. Zack didn't just want to rescue this foal physically. He needed to heal its spirit, too, and that required patience, understanding, and time. And in that moment, the foal had taken its first step toward healing, trusting the man who had come to save it, not through force, but through quiet, gentle reassurance. As Zack continued his quiet interaction with the foal, a shift in the air caught his attention. A low, almost imperceptible sound rippled through the evening stillness, the sound of hooves. His eyes quickly scanned the horizon, where the golden light of the setting sun painted the landscape in a warm, ethereal glow. There, in the distance, emerging from the trees, was a mare. Her coat was sleek, a deep chestnut hue that gleamed even from afar. She stood tall, her head held high, and her posture was unwavering, like a warrior ready to protect her own. Zack's heart skipped a beat. He recognized the energy instantly. The unmistakable aura of a mother, fierce and protective, ready to defend her young at all costs. The mare's muscles were taut, her every movement deliberate, as though she was both assessing the situation and preparing for action. Zack's first instinct was to step back and give her space, but he knew he couldn't let fear dictate his actions. This wasn't just any mare. This was the foal's mother, and she wasn't just concerned about her baby. She was a symbol of everything wild, untamed, and fiercely protective. He could feel the weight of her gaze even from a distance, a warning, a challenge, and a call to action all rolled into one. The mare's eyes locked onto Zack, her gaze sharp and penetrating. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze around them. There was no mistaking the message in her stare. She was sizing him up, deciding whether he posed a threat to her foal, whether he was someone she needed to defend against. Her ears flicked back and forth, alert to every movement Zack made. Her stance was low, her weight shifted slightly forward, and every muscle in her body was prepared for a confrontation, should it come to that. Zack knew the importance of this moment. The foal's mother wasn't just a wild animal. She was a force of nature. She was the protector, the survivor, the one who had fought and endured everything to keep her baby safe. Zack respected that, and as he met her gaze, He understood the responsibility that lay before him. If he wanted to help the foal, he had to show the mother that he wasn't a threat, that he was an ally, someone worthy of her trust. But as the mare's eyes narrowed and her powerful frame remained rooted in place, Zack didn't flinch. Instead, he took a steadying breath, his heart thudding in his chest, but his hands remained steady at his sides. He had dealt with dangerous animals before, but this was different. This wasn't about brute strength. It was about mutual respect. He wasn't here to tame or control, but to offer a sanctuary, a place where both mother and foal could heal. Zack stood motionless, the silence between them heavy with tension. The mare's eyes never left him. Her body coiled like a spring, ready to react at any moment. Every muscle in her body seemed to communicate one thing: come any closer, and I'll defend my own. But Zack wasn't intimidated. He didn't want to challenge her, he just needed to get closer to the foal. Slowly, he took a few steps forward, his feet making soft sounds in the dry dirt. The mare didn't flinch, but Zack could see the wariness in her eyes deepen. Her nostrils flared, and she stomped her hooves into the ground. A warning shot fired into the air. It was clear she wasn't sure what to make of him yet. Zack could feel her uncertainty, her protective instincts fighting with the need to understand whether he was a threat or not. Zack's eyes softened as he slowly dropped to one knee. He wasn't going to make any sudden moves. He spoke, his voice calm and steady. "I'm not here to hurt her," he said softly, more to the mare than anyone else. "I'm here to help." He extended his hand, palm open, his posture non-threatening, hoping she would sense that he meant no harm. But the mare's eyes narrowed even further, her stance not shifting. Zack knew the tension wasn't going to dissolve instantly. It would take time, and patience was something he had learned to master. Still, something in him felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a mother protecting her baby. It was an animal safeguarding her history, her survival, and the life of her foal. If he was going to gain her trust, he couldn't rush it. He needed to wait for her to come to him, just as he had waited for the foal. As the seconds ticked by, Zack felt the mare's gaze shift, as though she were assessing his every movement, weighing the risk of letting him closer. He stayed still, offering nothing but calm assurance. He could feel her wariness in the air between them, the unspoken challenge. And yet, there was something else, a subtle shift. The mare's body was still tense, but there was a glimmer of something softer in her eyes now. Maybe it was the foal behind him, or maybe it was the simple act of patience. Either way, Zack wasn't about to back down. If he was going to help them, both the mare and the foal, he had to stay grounded in his approach. He had to show them that he wasn't a threat, and he wasn't going to hurt their fragile peace. Taking another step forward, he was prepared for anything, but his movements were slow and controlled. He wasn't going to rush this. The mare's intense gaze never wavered, but Zack could feel the tension easing, even if it was only just slightly. Slowly, ever so slowly, the mare took a small step toward him. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make his heart race. She hadn't moved in response to anyone or anything for what felt like years. But here she was, responding to him. Zack spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not going to hurt you. I promise," he reassured her, his voice soft yet steady. He had learned from working with animals that trust wasn't something that could be demanded or rushed. It had to be earned piece by piece, moment by moment. And this was the beginning of that. The mare was not just an animal to be tamed. She was a mother, with instincts and a history that Zack couldn't fully understand. But he could offer her something that meant just as much: respect and trust. And slowly, with the world holding its breath, the mare took another step forward. Zack understood that trust couldn't be rushed. Every movement he made needed to be measured and deliberate, signaling to the mare that he wasn't a threat. He remained still, his presence calm but steady, offering no sudden movements that might startle her. The mare watched him intently, her eyes following every step he took as he slowly moved toward the foal. With each action, Zack kept his body language open and non-threatening. He didn't push her. Instead, he allowed her to come to him at her own pace. For a while, the mare kept her distance, her hooves still firmly planted in the dirt, eyes never leaving him. Zack could sense her wariness, but he didn't take it personally. He was in no hurry. He had seen the power of patience before, especially with wild animals who had been through trauma. Zack's slow movements and soft voice were his tools of reassurance, and he was prepared to keep at it for as long as it took. The mare followed him from a distance, her eyes sharp and watchful. She didn't approach him too closely, and she kept herself between Zack and her foal, just as any protective mother would. Yet, Zack noticed something in her behavior, a subtle shift. Though she was cautious, she was no longer completely rigid. She wasn't reacting as violently as she had at first. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. He was moving closer, earning the space to prove he could be trusted. The mare stayed a few steps behind, but her presence was unmistakable. She was still the dominant force in this space, and she moved with calculated grace, her steps deliberate and silent. Every so often, her eyes flicked from Zack to her foal, checking on the young one's well-being. She wasn't foolish. She knew that her baby was vulnerable, especially now that it was recovering from the trauma of being trapped. Zack, too, kept his focus on the foal. He had made it clear through his actions that his priority was the little one's safety and well-being. As he knelt beside the foal, gently stroking its dusty coat and offering soft words of encouragement, the mare observed quietly from a distance. She didn't approach him immediately, but there was a subtle shift in her body language, an acceptance that Zack's attention was focused where it needed to be, on her foal. The foal, still weak but growing stronger, looked up at Zack with cautious curiosity. It wasn't quite ready to trust him yet, but it was slowly coming around. Zack could feel the connection growing between them, even if it was tenuous. The mare's watchful eye never strayed far from the scene, but she didn't interfere. This was the moment that Zack knew he had earned. The chance to prove himself to the mother, not just through words, but through actions. Zack knew that the next step in building trust would involve more than just patience. He had to show the mare that he wasn't a threat, not just to her, but to her foal as well. He moved slowly back toward her, speaking softly, reassuringly. "I won't hurt him. I'm here to help," he said. His words meant for both the mare and her baby. Zack's voice was calm, steady, and unwavering as he continued to move cautiously closer to the foal. He crouched down beside the young Mustang, his hand lightly brushing over its ribs, feeling the fragility of its small body. The foal flinched at his touch, but it didn't retreat. Zack understood this was progress, even if it was small. He repeated his promise, his voice soft but filled with sincerity. "You're safe here," he said, glancing briefly at the mare. He could see her watching him, her eyes searching for any sign that he might be lying, any hint that he would hurt her foal. For a few long moments, the mare remained motionless, her gaze unwavering. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she moved. Slowly, carefully, she took a few steps forward, her muscles rippling beneath her coat as she moved with silent grace. Zack held his breath, unsure if the mare would make another sudden retreat. But she didn't. She paused just a few feet away, close enough to keep a protective eye on her foal, but far enough to allow Zack some space. Zack looked up at her, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't want to break this fragile moment. He remained still, watching as she came closer, inch by inch. Her presence, once commanding and intimidating, now seemed more like a mother's quiet, reserved trust. And Zack knew that this was the beginning of something far more meaningful. The foal's condition was slowly improving, its breath stronger and more steady. Zack continued to care for it, offering the little one food and water, while keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. Every now and then, he would glance up at the mare, whose eyes never left him for long. The tension between them had shifted, but there was still a lingering caution in the air. The foal, while gaining strength, was still fragile. Zack could see it in the way the little one moved, the hesitation in its steps as it tried to stand. But it was making progress, and that was enough for Zack to continue the work. He couldn't rush the recovery, not with the foal's past so full of trauma, but with the mare's cautious yet steady acceptance. He knew that the recovery would continue. Slowly, as the mare began to relax, she would see more of what Zach was trying to offer. Not just to her foal, but to both of them. Safety, respect, and a chance to heal together. The bond was still fragile, but it was starting to form. And Zach, patient and understanding, knew that trust couldn't be rushed. It had to be earned, one small step at a time. Over the next few days, Zach focused all his energy on caring for the foal. Each morning, he arrived early to check on its condition, bringing fresh food and clean water. The foal, though still a bit wary of his presence, gradually began to respond to the care he provided. Its ribs no longer protruded as sharply, and its fur began to regain a healthier shine. With each meal and every gentle touch, the foal grew a little stronger, both physically and emotionally. Zach observed the foal's progress with quiet pride. The once weak creature, now finding its footing, had a newfound energy. The steps, though tentative at first, grew bolder and more confident. One afternoon, Zach sat by the hay as the foal finally began to show its playful side. It nipped at the air, kicked its legs, and even began to frolic clumsily around the enclosure. It was a moment of pure joy that Zach had been waiting for. The foal's spirit was returning. This little one was no longer the fragile, traumatized creature that had been trapped and alone, but a young Mustang filled with energy and curiosity. Zach couldn't help but smile at the foal's antics. It nuzzled his arm, almost as if thanking him, and Zach stroked its back gently, knowing how far it had come. The foal was learning to trust, not just in his care but in the idea of safety and love. With each passing day, the little one became more playful, more comfortable in Zach's presence. And as the foal's health improved, so did its trust in him. This was a bond that was solidifying in small, beautiful moments. All the while, the mare never strayed far from the scene. She was always near, her sharp eyes scanning Zach's every movement. Although she had begun to trust him in her own way, she still kept a close watch over her foal. The protective instincts that had initially made her wary of Zach were still very much alive. She observed, silently and cautiously, from the distance, always keeping her body between Zach and the foal. Her gaze was intense, as though she was making sure that every action he took was safe, kind, and genuine. At times, when Zach would lean down to stroke the foal's back or feed it, the mare would step forward, just enough to ensure he wasn't a threat. It was a subtle movement, almost imperceptible to anyone who didn't know the mare's cautious nature, but Zach saw it. It was the unspoken understanding between the two of them. She was watching him, not out of suspicion but out of protection for her young. She had seen enough to know that Zach wasn't a danger, but her maternal instincts could not simply let go. Despite her caution, the mare seemed to relax slightly with each passing day. She didn't move in to interfere, but she would approach when Zach seemed to be most connected with her foal. Sometimes, she would graze nearby, still within sight, but keeping herself at a safe distance. Zach respected this boundary. He understood that trust was a delicate thing, and he wasn't about to rush her. He gave her space, knowing that healing and trust needed time, especially for a mother who had been through so much with her foal. Zach's movements became more fluid, always keeping the mare in mind. He'd never approach too quickly or make any sudden gestures. The bond he was building with the foal was becoming stronger, but he knew it wouldn't mean anything if the mare didn't feel safe, too. Zach was patient, watching for the signs that she was beginning to let her guard down. And bit by bit, the mare did just that. She didn't move any closer, but her eyes softened when she saw Zach's calm and steady actions. There was something in the way she looked at him now, something that said she was starting to believe in her own way that he was here for them both. It wasn't trust yet, but it was a start that Zach hoped would grow into something more. Zach was keenly aware that he couldn't force the mare into a bond that wasn't ready to form. As the days passed, he continued to care for her foal without ever pushing the mare. She had her own pace, her own timeline for accepting him fully, and Zach was determined to honor that. He moved through the barn and the enclosure quietly, always aware of her watchful eyes, always cautious not to do anything that might make her feel cornered. At times, the mare would step further back, retreating into the shadowed corners of the pasture, watching silently. Zack didn't mind. He knew she was still weighing him, still observing how he treated her foal and how patient he was with her. Every action was a small test. Every kind word, every moment of care, every gesture of calm. An offering of peace, not just to the foal, but to the mare as well. One morning, as Zack stood at the edge of the corral, watching the foal and the mare, he noticed something different. The mare was standing closer to the foal than she had before, her posture relaxed, her head slightly lowered. She was still a few yards away, but there was a softness in the way she held herself, an acknowledgement that Zack's presence wasn't a threat. It was a subtle sign, but it was there. Zack felt his heart swell with hope. This was the beginning of something more than just a rescue story. It was the start of a real bond, one that had been earned by patience, respect, and quiet understanding. And with that understanding came a new possibility for the future. The mare wasn't ready to trust completely, not yet. But Zack knew she was starting to see him for what he was. Someone who had earned her respect and, maybe one day, her trust. It wasn't a grand moment, nor a dramatic event. But one day, Zack realized that the mare had made her choice. It was subtle, like the quiet dawn breaking after a long night. He had been working with the foal, as usual, when he noticed that the mare had positioned herself just a few steps closer than she ever had before. She didn't flinch or retreat as he moved about the enclosure. Her stance was still protective, still watchful, but there was a difference in her presence. It was no longer just wariness. There was a hint of acceptance in the way she stood. The once distant mare had drawn closer, and in doing so, she had silently chosen to trust him. There were no dramatic gestures, no sudden rush of affection, but the small changes in the way the mare interacted with Zack spoke volumes. Her behavior was no longer dictated by fear, but by a growing sense of safety and understanding. She would stand calmly as he worked near her foal, and occasionally, she would even allow him to come a little closer without showing signs of discomfort. It wasn't full trust. Not yet. But it was the first solid indication that the wall between them was beginning to crumble. Zack smiled to himself as he realized what had happened. Trust, he understood now, wasn't something that could be forced or rushed. It had to be earned over time, through consistent actions, quiet patience, and respect. Every small step, every act of care, had built a foundation of trust between them, and it had taken root in the mare's heart. There was no grand declaration, no sudden change, but the truth was clear. She had chosen him in her own quiet way. Zack stood still for a moment, watching the mare as she grazed nearby. He couldn't help but reflect on the bond that had developed between them, one that had been formed not through dominance or control, but through patience and understanding. He realized that taming wasn't about bending the will of an animal. It was about earning its trust. In the mare's eyes, he saw the reflection of his own journey, one of trust, of patience, and of respect for her autonomy. He thought about the days when the mare would shy away from his presence, when she would rear or move away with a sharp, defensive stance. Those days felt distant now. The quiet moments they shared, moments when the mare would allow him into her space, when she would give him a glance that wasn't filled with fear but with understanding. Those were the true milestones. These were the moments of connection that Zack had worked so hard for. Zack understood now that taming was not about breaking a spirit. It was about building a bridge of trust. The mare had allowed him into her world, not because he had demanded it, but because he had shown her, day by day, that he was worthy of her trust. There were no quick fixes, no magical moments where everything changed. It was about the steady, unwavering effort of being there for her and her foal, without any expectation in return. With a soft breath, Zack acknowledged the reality of the situation. The mare had chosen him, and though she was still cautious, still protective of her young, there was no doubt in his mind that they were moving toward a future together, one built on mutual respect and understanding. The bond between them had been quietly formed, piece by piece, and now it stood strong. It wasn't about control. It was about trust, and Zack had earned it one moment at a time. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sanctuary in a soft, golden glow, Zack stood in front of the mare's enclosure. His gaze was fixed on the mare and her foal as they grazed peacefully together. It had been weeks since the first day they'd met, weeks of patient care, trust-building, and quiet understanding. Now, Zack felt something stir within him, something powerful and unwavering. He knew what he had to say. With his heart full of conviction, he spoke softly, though his words were clear and strong, carrying the weight of a promise. "You'll never have to worry again," Zack murmured to the mare, his voice full of sincerity. "I won't let anyone take you or your foal away from here. You're safe now. This is your home." As he spoke, he noticed something in the mare's eyes. A shift, a subtle change in her posture. She didn't move, but for the first time, her head didn't remain high and defensive. There was a slight lowering of her gaze, a softening in the way she stood beside her foal. It wasn't an acknowledgement through words, but through presence. It was as if she was absorbing his promise, taking it in and accepting it, without hesitation. There was a deep understanding between them, a shared recognition of the bond they had forged. Zack stood there for a moment longer, knowing that his vow wasn't just about protection. It was about creating a space of safety and trust, a place where they could all heal together. The mare didn't need grand gestures, nor did she need him to say anything more. Her acceptance of his vow was quiet, but it spoke volumes. Zack felt the connection between them, something powerful that needed no words to be understood. He had given her his word, and in return, she had given him her trust. Then, something extraordinary happened. As Zack moved slowly toward the mare, she didn't shy away or retreat as she had in the past. Her ears twitched in his direction, and her body remained still, as if contemplating his next move. Zack's heart raced, but he didn't rush. He had learned to move slowly, to respect her boundaries, and to wait for the right moment. With gentle hands, Zack reached out and softly touched the mare's shoulder, something he had never done before. The instant his fingers made contact with her coat, a wave of warmth spread through him. The mare didn't flinch, nor did she pull away. Instead, she remained calm, her body relaxing under his touch. It was a simple gesture, but for both of them, it was a moment of profound significance. This was the moment that marked the full acceptance of his presence in her life. Zack felt a lump form in his throat as the weight of the mare's trust settled over him. She had allowed him in fully. There was no more distance between them, no more hesitation. She had chosen him, not just to help her, but to be a part of her world, to be a guardian of her safety. And with that acceptance came an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Zack understood the depth of their connection now, and he knew it was something he would never take for granted. This wasn't just about a man and a wild animal. It was about a bond built on trust, a promise made, and a commitment to each other. As Zack stood there, with his hand resting gently on the mare's shoulder, he realized that their journey together had just begun. The promise he had made wasn't just about keeping them safe physically. It was about nurturing this trust, allowing it to grow, and never breaking the bond they had worked so hard to build. In the mare's quiet acceptance, Zack knew he had gained something priceless, an unspoken understanding that would guide them both in the days to come. As the sun set on another day, casting its warm, golden light across the sanctuary, Zack stood in front of the mare and foal's enclosure, his heart full of quiet pride. The mare, once a fierce and wary wild creature, now stood calmly beside him, her foal grazing nearby. The trust they had built over weeks of patience, respect, and care was now palpable, a tangible presence in the peaceful atmosphere around them. They were home now, not just physically within the boundaries of the sanctuary, but in a way that transcended any fences or gates. Zack realized, standing there in the soft evening light, that this place, the sanctuary, had become more than just a refuge for animals. It had become a sanctuary for him as well, a place of healing and growth. It was a space where broken spirits were mended, where the wild was respected and understood, and where bonds were formed through the simplest yet most profound acts of kindness. The mare and foal were no longer just survivors of their pasts. They were living, breathing testaments to the power of trust and compassion. and Zach had been honored to be the one to help them find their way back to safety, to their place of peace. As Zach stood there, watching the mare gently nuzzle her foal, he couldn't help but reflect on how deeply their journey had transformed him. The mare, with her wary eyes and fierce instinct, had chosen him to help her protect her baby. And in doing so, she had shown him that the wild, in all its untamed beauty, had its own wisdom, one that went beyond the need for control or domination. It was a lesson in patience, in understanding, and in the quiet strength of earning trust, not demanding it. The foal, once frail and fearful, had blossomed under Zach's care, growing stronger each day. He had witnessed the foal's transformation from a fragile, uncertain creature into a spirited, playful soul full of life. And the mare, who had been so afraid to trust, had finally lowered her defenses, choosing to believe in Zach's promise. In their bond, Zach had found something unexpected. He had found a new understanding of the bond between animals and humans, a connection that went deeper than anyone could have imagined. It was a bond built not on ownership, but on mutual respect, trust, and shared history. Zach's thoughts drifted back to the days when he had first encountered the foal, the cage, and the wild mother's silent plea. He wondered, looking back, if he had truly understood what the mother was asking of him then. Would he have opened the cage? Would he have listened to the quiet plea of the wild mare? As the mare and foal grazed peacefully together, Zach knew that the bond they had created was something extraordinary, a reminder that when we open our hearts and truly listen, the wild can find a place within us, too. He turned his attention back to the mare, who raised her head to meet his gaze. And for a brief moment, they simply stood there together, an unspoken promise between them, a mutual respect that needed no words. Would you have opened that cage? Would you have listened to the wild mother's unspoken plea? Zach's story reminds us of the deep, unspoken connection that can exist between humans and animals, one that is built not on domination, but on understanding. It's a call to listen, to pay attention, and to act when the need is great. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the bond we share with all living beings. Do we truly see them for who they are? Do we offer them the safety and trust they deserve? Join us in supporting and protecting these beautiful creatures, for their journey is not just theirs. It's one that can transform us all.